Welcome back, guys, to the Bench Mob. I'm Dankos, my co-host Marcus. It is a very exciting day in the NBA world. It was draft day today, and as usual, the draft produced a lot of surprises, a lot of sliders, and guys that moved up surprisingly to be picked higher.
Yes, sir.
There were some trades that were thrown into the mix, but as usual, it's always been craziness, and we're looking forward to dissecting it and letting you know, obviously, where each pick fared in the first round and some of our winners and losers in this draft, and just on an overall basis, let you know what we thought of the proceedings.
Yeah, absolutely. So much went on today. I mean, I feel like Victor going 1. Obviously, there's no news there. But Brandon Miller scoot, I feel like we need to address that first because we can save Victor for later. I feel like that's a separate conversation.
Yeah.
But I know for one, we've made a few videos on Brandon Miller. Everyone's tried to tell us Scoot Henderson over Miller. He's the better fit, blah, blah, blah. He's some hyper-athletic 6'2" guard, which he is, don't get me wrong. But from the jump, we knew that Brandon Miller was going to be the best fit available for the Charlotte Hornets team. There's no news about it. I mean, he can play on and off the ball. He can catch and shoot. He's athletic. He has defensive upside. And he can coexist with franchise cornerstone LaMelo Ball, which obviously that's the reason why they drafted him. But I want to hear your thoughts because I know you're the huge Brandon Miller fan out of us too. And I feel like you have a lot of good things to say.
Well, where do you start with Brandon Miller? I think, in terms of size and, having that prototypical kind of build that a lot of NBA teams are looking for now, a 6'8", 6'9", a forward who can, handle the ball, shoot the ball. He's probably the best shooter in this draft outside of Bryce Sensabaugh. He's a winner. He makes winning plays. He can be dynamic in transition. I think he's improved his rim finishing, and also, his versatility on the defensive side of the ball to be able to guard multiple positions, very much in the mold of a Paul George, who's his favourite player and someone who actually followed him back recently on Instagram and
called him the GOAT.
Yeah, controversial. But, I think he's just looking from a standpoint of who he looked up to. And, at the end of the day, the GOAT conversation can be a very broad thing. And, it's just determined on what you think is.
It's very stupid.
It is.
I saw a lot of LeBron fans coming at him like, how dare he disrespect the king on my Instagram, this and that. Like, at the end of the day, there's a reason why I said Paul George. He models his game after him. That's his GOAT. Like, what's wrong with that?
Exactly.
Like you're my GOAT. You're the greatest of all time. I don't see anything wrong with, calling someone a GOAT. But everybody wants to just be so... They just get too caught up on it. When there's so many great players that go unappreciated, I'm glad he said PG's the GOAT.
No, 100%. And like I said, his game, I think it's very much suited to the NBA game in terms of the spacing that he'll find in the league. Obviously, college is more zone defense, longer shot clock.
Yeah.
You don't probably have as much space to be able to find the gaps. And obviously, with better shooters in the NBA, you're going to find more closeouts, more chances for him to obviously get open looks and to be able to utilize his athletic ability to put the ball in the basket. So I think alongside a guy like LaMelo Ball, he can complement him. LaMelo obviously will be the primary ball handler, so it takes that responsibility away from Brandon Miller, and he can just ease his way into the NBA game and get a feel for it, and really help take a bit of that brunt off LaMelo himself. So it's a good pick. I went onto the Hornets Instagram comments, and they were all salty. They're like, no, we hate this pick. Scoot was...
Oh, really?
Yeah.
They're not even backing it.
No, they're not. Like, some people are saying give him a chance and everything like that, but a lot of them are just so caught up with Scoot's athleticism and his mixtape and his highlights against Victor Wembanyama in that G League Ignite game that all of a sudden everything that Brandon Miller did, despite his struggles in the tournament and everything like that, and on the off-court stuff, we've addressed it a million times already in the previous videos, but just on that entirety... you still got to look at it from that perspective and say, like, he is the second best player in this draft, and I'm going to stand by that until this day and until going forward until he proves me otherwise. But I think, Michael Jordan was impressed with his second workout. He showed a lot more in that side of things rather than the first one where he was probably a little bit lax in terms of his intensity, but he showed why he is, like I said, regarded as the second best prospect, and Julie was picked in that position.
I mean, talking smack to MJ, has balls to do that.
Yeah.
As a rookie, I feel like too many people are getting caught up in the case, like with the murder of that girl.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, innocent till proven guilty. And yeah, I mean, he hasn't been proven guilty yet, so
and
just give him a chance.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say one more thing regarding that. It's obviously there's a lot of due diligence that's done. These NBA players that are picked in this draft, it's an investment to these teams. So a team like the Charlotte Hornets with the second pick and notoriously had history of selecting guys that were either injury prone or, you know, maybe didn't have the skill set to transition to the NBA, a la Michael Kidd-Gilchrist. You got to look at it from that perspective. They've done enough due diligence to understand the situation. They've basically gone through, you know, everything that they needed to with this case, and they feel comfortable in the fact that they can trust Brandon Miller's character based off all this stuff that's been going on, and they wouldn't have picked him in the second pick in the draft if they didn't feel like they were safe in the knowledge that, you know, this was all going to go behind him.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think we've wrapped up everything we kind of need to say about Brandon Miller. Overall, Hornets, it's a dub. They take home a win for sure. I think with Brandon, you know, they can push for playoff contention. But with that being said, with the third overall pick, the Portland Trailblazers, they ended up selecting Scoot Henderson. Don't get me wrong, Scoot's a talent. There's a reason why people labelled him as a generational point guard talent. At 6'2", though, Blazers, I'm disappointed in them. Really disappointed in the Blazers. I mean, to me, it was either you draft Scoot and you move on from Dame, as much as he's the franchise GOAT of that organisation. I don't think these two will coexist well, and it will lead to winning basketball in any sense. Like, Dame staying, to me, hinders Scoot's growth, and then Scoot getting drafted there, it's like, how can that be any good for Dame? They'll take the ball out of each other's hands a fair bit. I think it'll be the CJ Dame type of duo again, but at the end of the day, Scoot, he's not a great shooter right now. Two undersized guards, they'll struggle defensively, especially when you got guys like Simons and Sharp at your disposal. Why wouldn't you move on from Dame and try get more assets and build with Scoot, who is this guy who's labelled as the next great point guard in the league? Yeah, so disappointing on my end. Give me your 2 cents.
I don't think we're going to hear the end of this. Is not going to be the last time we hear of the Scoot Dame trade talks. I think, or like the whole situation. I think obviously some trades take place on draft night, but I think at the end of the day, the Blazers may have had that mindset of take the best player available, because we can, if we're not going to...
Yeah, don't get me wrong. Draft him.
Yeah.
But just pick between... I mean, they could still trade Dame, or they could still trade Scoot.
Yeah.
Obviously, the Pelicans, they're still going to be interested in, who knows, maybe a Zion or Be Ideal could be on the way, but it's just like, I really thought it was going to be done today.
Yeah, you'd think so, but I guess with a trade of that magnitude for a player of Dame's stature, I don't think they wanted to maybe necessarily just rush into it and maybe regret the trade and not being able to get back as much that they could have got from it, because it might have felt like it might have been sort of a panic trade to try and just get him off the books or to try and get him to where he needed to be. So I think with these kind of trades that, you know, like I said, the superstars involved in, usually you probably need to take a bit more time to really hash it out and see what you can really extract from the teams that are interested in that particular player. So I think they did the right thing in drafting him, because at the end of the day, whether they decide to move on from Scoot, they can probably get something in return for Scoot, because his value is so high. Like you mentioned, he's one of the next great point guards in the league, for what he's hyped up to be, that is. But at the same time, even if you decide to trade Dame, you can extract a lot of value out of Dame and be able to then start that rebuild for Portland. You got a generational, or arguably a generational point guard in Scoot. You got Shaedon Sharp, who's, you know, his first year, even though with limited production in terms of getting in the starting lineup, getting the minutes that he probably should have been getting, he showed tremendous potential. And then if you can somehow keep Simons in there, I guess the rest of the team, that's where you're probably lacking a little bit. Outside of those guys, there are some talented players on that roster, but I don't think anything that turns the corner. So if they decide to, like I said, part ways with Dame, it'll be a full rebuild. You got some talented players coming up in next year's draft, Martis Buzelis, Isaiah Collier, but again, that's a point guard, so you probably don't need another one. But just stating that there are some very talented guys in next year's draft. Ron Holland as well. So that could, again, look at potentially fast-tracking their rebuild if they decide to part ways with Dame. But again, the fit-wise right now, if they decide to keep Dame and have Scoot, it probably doesn't make sense because Scoot's not a really good off-the-ball player. But all in all, I can understand it from a Portland Trailblazers perspective and obviously taking the best player available in this sense because the trade talks can still eventuate even after a week, 2 weeks after this whole draft has settled down.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting. I think going forward for the Blazers, they have a lot of talent there, obviously, in those three guys, Scoot, Simons, now, and also Sharp too. But it'll be the most Portland thing for them to just hold on to Dame and not do anything. Really hope they don't because I love the Blazers. I'm not a Blazers fan, but they've always had a soft spot in my heart. So I'm hoping they do the right thing and they just pick between the two because otherwise they're going to be stuck in nowhere land.
Yeah. And that's the worst thing, like a franchise that doesn't have a direction and they sort of just like...
Middle of the pack.
It's probably the worst thing you can be in the NBA.
Exactly.
Because if you don't get to the playoffs or if you get to the playoffs and compete, but you don't get past the first round and you're doing it for numerous amounts of years, you're actually harming yourself more as a franchise than if you just completely clean house and start from scratch.
Yeah. And
then you could, like I said, strike gold in the draft, strike gold in a couple of free agency moves, trade moves, and then again, your timeline is actually shifted forward and improved quite substantially. So, prime example, my Washington Wizards, which we'll get to in a moment, but like getting rid of Bradley Beal obviously needed to clear that contract off the books. The new front office comes into play. Yeah. That completely has reshaped the entire face of our franchise. So again, Portland may need to look at doing something similar, but again, in terms of the magnitude of a player that Damian Lillard is right now compared to a Brad Beal, Dame holds a lot more value. So I can understand why they'd be a bit more reluctant, a bit more hesitant, especially because he's been so loyal and he's stated numerous times that he wants to be there long term. Dame has. I can understand it from that perspective, but we'll just have to wait and see. It's not going to be the end of the debacle, I think.
Especially because he's coming off that career year.
Yeah, correct. So fourth pick, that was the Rockets, who, we'll touch on our winners and losers, but I think they were one of the biggest winners in this draft.
For sure.
Took home Amen Thompson, the point guard, 6'7" point guard from Overtime Elite. There was talks, that Cam Whitmore was going to be at this pick at number 4, and he was on Jay Billis's best available at the number 4 slot. So on paper, it was looking like that was going to be the case. And then we've heard the intel from that Cam Whitmore's interviews and medical history, etc., was all in the poor spectrum. So if we want to state it that way, and he had a good individual workout with his agency WME. But his individual workouts with the teams and the interviews have come back to obviously with negative feedback. And so that has forced him to slide, but they managed to get him at 20. I know we're probably going to get to that point, but I thought I may as well touch on this at the same time because they're both top 5 talents. So to get Amen Thompson, a guy who's probably the best athlete in this draft, and to pair him alongside a guy like Jalen Green, and then to add Cam Whitmore to that, you got probably one of the most athletic lineups in the NBA. It's absolutely crazy to think that they got 2 top 5 talents in this draft.
With Jalen.
Yeah, correct. And they didn't even have to trade up to get Cam Whitmore. You know what I mean? There was a lot of talk. A lot of teams were looking at possibly trading up, but the fact that they could just sit at that spot at 20 and no one was picking him constantly, and they land both him and Amen Thompson. I think that's fast tracked their rebuild.
For sure.
And you add Jabari Smith to that as well. So what are your thoughts on the whole Houston situation? Do you think they made the right calls with Amen Thompson, or do you think they could have gone another route?
I thought from the jump they were going to go with Cam Whitmore. In my head, I'm thinking reunion with James Harden is on the horizon. But now I don't really know. Would you even want to bring a guy like Harden back just because you've taken Amen, who's obviously a phenomenal point guard in his own right, gifted playmaker. Basically, he's elite in all levels of his game besides his 3-point shot. do you just let Jalen and Amen flourish, and maybe they don't play winning basketball, but that's probably the backcourt duo for the next decade. I don't know what's next for KPJ, but I think they did the right thing. They took the best player on the board, the most athletically gifted, the guy with the most upside and potential. Amen's the right pick. It's just like, I don't see them being any better necessarily. I don't think Amen's ready-made for the NBA just yet. But with that being said, like, he's a rookie, so I'm not going to give up on him for sure. Like, I think he's going to be a freak in nature when he gets to the league. It's just like, yeah, you got to give these rookies time.
There's probably question marks about his competition that he faced at OT Elite. You know, it had that very much like that. I wouldn't say. I think this is a bit of a diss towards OT Elite. I kind of gave me JBA vibes.
JBA.
Yeah, the LeVar Ball, the big baller brand league that he had. It kind of gave me those vibes when I was watching the streams and stuff. But don't get me wrong, I think the talent level was obviously a lot stronger. They had Rob Dillingham as well, who was a top 15 recruit in the nation. So it wasn't complete like bums that they were facing. But again, when you compare it to college basketball, G League Ignite, international basketball overseas, that the likes that, you know, Bilal Koulibaly and Victor Wembanyama played in, and all the other leagues as well, the Spanish league, etc. The competition is a lot weaker. So you are taking a risk in that, and you're hoping that it doesn't matter where he plays, that he's just a natural basketball or a freak athlete, and he can adapt to whatever league he's put in and face any competition level that comes his way. So I'm fingers crossed for the Rockets. I hope they do turn a corner, because they are a franchise that obviously does have some really good pedigree. Obviously, back in the Olajuwon days, hopefully they can return to that. But
hopefully, I don't love Houston, but it's just like, yeah, you never want to see any team stay at the bottom for too long. I feel like with the league, like, I'm a Lakers fan, but in all, I'm a basketball fan. So the game's at its best when, you know, teams at the bottom rise to the top, like we saw with Sacramento, and hopefully, as bad as it's hard to say, but like, yeah, hopefully, Jalen and Amen can figure it out and be scary backcourt duo for years to come.
100%. I think, you know, KPJ is probably, I think his role in that team, he's probably not going to want to come off the bench.
Yeah,
so you probably look at maybe trying to see what you can get in a trade for him.
I don't think you're getting much.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So
yeah,
so it's a risk in itself, but again, that's something for the Rockets front office to figure out. And speaking of Amen Thompson, pick 5. Again, this was a curveball. This was probably the first curveball of the night. The first 4 picks, arguably outside of the Cam Whitmore situation, you could say that the first 4 picks went the way it was supposed to. We sort of predicted that in our mock draft.
Yeah.
But pick 5 threw in a bit of a curveball with Ausar Thompson being picked. You know, there was talks of him going possibly 8-9 to the Wizards, possibly to the Jazz, or even to, you know, the Magic.
Yeah.
For him to get into the top 5, it's a bit of a shock.
Yeah.
And it kind of doesn't make sense with the whole situation they've already got with Jaden Ivey, Cade Cunningham. I can understand where they're coming from. They want a guy who's obviously athletic, long, can defend, has got that versatility as a playmaker from the small forward spot. But again, I feel like they're going to rue not drafting Cam Whitmore. Yeah. I just have this feeling in my head.
Nah, for sure. Like, to be honest, my honest opinion is a hell of a talent. I think he's exactly like his brother, but you take away Amen's gifted playmaking skill set. I actually hate this pick. Like, I hate it so much. You have Jaden Ivey already, who's basically Ausar Thompson. Like, why would you need another Ivy at the small forward? Like, you got to force him to play small forward next to Cade, who in college, phenomenal shooter. In the NBA, he hasn't shown to be an elite shooter yet. He's been injured as well, but yeah, he hasn't shown to be that elite shooter. So you're pairing 3 guys who aren't necessarily the most elite shooters out there yet, and you're just hoping, you're just chucking them on the floor, like, go win a game. They're not going to be any better, I don't think. I think long-term drafting Ausar, I think you're stunting his growth, because you're pairing him with next to a guy like Ivy, all these 3 players, they need their shots.
Yeah.
They need their touches. I don't think it's the best case scenario, and I would much rather the Pistons select a guy like Jarace Walker or Taylor Hendricks, someone who can fit in the system long term next to Ivy and Cade. But yeah, that's just me.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, especially with Cade and Jaden Ivey, they're both very ball dominant guys. They're not really the best off the ball sort of players, and all three of these guys realistically. I mean, I saw Thompson did show signs that he could be a good shooter. In that playoff run in overtime elite, I think he shot like 40-something% from three on like 5 attempts or 4 attempts per game. So there is more potential for him as a shooter than from a men's standpoint. But again, doesn't make sense. I'm not too much of a fan of this pick either. I actually had him at like 8 or 9 on the mock. I think I had him going number 9 or number 7 to the to the Pacers or to the Jazz. I can't remember exactly which one I had him at, but obviously had him falling a little bit outside the top 5. So for him to stay with at this pick number 5, it's a bit of a shock. So, but this is your favorite pick of the draft, number 6, Anthony Black to the Orlando Magic. As soon as we watched this live earlier on, Marcus couldn't believe what he had seen. He didn't expect Anthony Black to go this high, nor did he expect another point guard or a guard of that matter to be selected by the Magic already, considering they have Markelle Fultz, Jalen Suggs, Cole Anthony. It's a very clogged up backcourt, so the fact that they went down this route was a bit of a surprise. So tell us what your thoughts are.
Orlando Magic, I'm just done with them. Dumbest franchise in the NBA. Terrible pick. I don't know why you would draft Anthony Black when Markelle Fultz last season just showed you he could be your point guard of the future. Basically, you said, nah, Markelle, we're not even got to invest in your development. We're going to take Anthony Black. We're going to put him ahead of you. We're going to stagnate your growth and chuck you on the bench. He's obviously I rate Anthony Black as a prospect. He's a potential two-way machine. He's athletic. He's a gifted playmaker like a Josh Giddey. But it's you already have a guy in Markelle Fultz. You have Jalen Suggs there, who, he was a top 4 pick. You have Cole Anthony, who's been promising. He's a chucker, but nevertheless, he's a solid player in the league, and I just feel like they're too guard heavy at the moment, and it's just I just don't like the pick at all. I would much rather see them. I understand there's no big guys really available at that pick, and it would be very risky to draft a guy like Derek Lively, but at the same time, I don't know, maybe they could have traded down, or they could have selected a guy like Taylor Hendricks, or just a complimentary player like even Grady Dick. And I understand what they try to do with Banchero, Bol, even Wendell, Franz, these big versatile players who are guards. But I just think it's too risky, especially when Markelle Fultz is already breaking out. And I'm a massive fan of Fultz, so it hurts my heart.
I do really like Anthony Black as a talent. I think had he been there at number 8 at the Wizards, I would have liked us to nab him there. Obviously, I don't know what kind of direction or what kind of thought process our new front office has in terms of, what kind of players they are looking for. But yeah, if he was there at that pick, I think he's probably just impressed so much in workouts and individual pre-draft processes that, his stock has been bumped up. And I think maybe the Orlando Magic looked at it from that perspective, and they said they've got a guy in Banchero 6'10", 6'11", Franz Wagner, another 6'9", 6'10" guy. You pair that up with a 6'7" guard, and then we'll move on. Even though we could go to number 11, we can wait for this number 11 pick, but then they go and nab Jett Howard, the son of Juwan, at number 11, a 6'8" guard. And both of their question marks were probably their shooting. He's got range, Jett Howard, but both him and Anthony Black, one of the question marks is their 3-point shooting. So again, where does that leave the Orlando Magic, a team that needs a little bit more 3-point shooting, which I probably would have considered even had they looked at Grady Dick in that situation as a shooter, someone that can put the ball in the basket from the 3 and just really stretch the defense out. But I can understand maybe what the thought process is from the front office, try and build these really hyper-athletic 6'7", 6'8" plus guys to have a massive starting lineup that will just, be too long and too lengthy to contend with on the defensive side of the ball.
Small ball, not small ball. They'll run in the opposite of what the Warriors are doing. They're trying to revolutionise the game, but I don't know. It's very bold of them and just untraditional. to be honest. And I just don't think this. They have so many pieces who they've just kind of wiped away. Jonathan Isaac, RJ Hampton, Fultz potentially now. It's like, I don't know. Maybe I'm just preying on potential that's been kind of hidden away, but it's not going to break out.
Yeah. I mean, you can't hate him for doing that because they did have 2 picks inside the top 11. So even if they miss on one,
Hits the other.
Exactly. So they can afford to take that risk. I mean, if you only have 1 pick in the next 2 years, for example, and like you've given up all your first rounders, then you really have to be selective about who you go for. So I can understand their thought process from that side of things. But again, when there was other players in that number 11 slot, and Jet Howard he started pushing his name late in the draft process to be like that, closer to the top 10. But again, he was projected by all accounts to be like a 15, 16 range. So to get him at 11, maybe it was a reach. But then again, the Orlando Magic, again, they had, like I said, numerous draft assets. So I don't blame him, but we'll just have to wait and see how it plays out because it could be an interesting turn of events for them and where their rebuild sort of projects to go on to.
Yeah, I'll let you take the show for the next pick just because you're the massive Washington Wizards fan here, and when we were watching this together live, it was a bit confusing, but nevertheless.
So, the trade must have taken place prior to this, but they didn't announce it officially until both picks were made. So, Indiana had originally drafted Bilal Coulibaly at pick 7, biggest riser of the draft.
Yeah, by far.
You did a video on him the other day, and you were expecting him to go possibly, or hoping to go to the Lakers at pick 17. That obviously didn't work out. He's actually slid into the top 10. I did say in the mock draft and in the biggest risers and sleepers of the draft, that video that we did like a week ago, that he was one of the guys that was putting his name out there after his strong performances at the French Championship games again alongside Victor Wembanyama for Mets 92. So he's absolutely killed it in terms of getting his name all the way into the top 10. Wemby actually tweeted and said I knew he was a top 10 talent, but not many people could see that he should be top 5. Yeah. So by all accounts, I think, he's one of those boom or bust kind of players.
Not for sure.
There's been a bad history of French guards, especially the likes of Frank Ntilikina, who was, again, expected to be this next big thing, but he was very raw, and obviously he hasn't turned out the way that the New York Knicks anticipated him to turn out, hence why they traded him, and he's bounced around a few different organizations. But I do feel like Bilal Coulibaly playing at that high level alongside a guy like Vic to push him and to, help him become the prospect he is, playing alongside a guy like that who's been obviously highly publicized. I don't know if I'm a fan of this, because Jarris Walker was the next pick, by the way. So he was the 8th pick. We actually drafted him, but then the trade took place. So if you didn't watch the draft, 8 and 7 were pick swapped. So we gave up some second rounders for him. So I don't know. Just with our drafting history, Denny Avdia over Tyrese Halliburton,
Johnny Davis,
Corey Kispert, he's shown signs, but again, there's nothing clear cut to say that he can add other dimensions to his game. So to add a guy like Bilal Coulibaly, mind you, we obviously did get Jordan Poole in that trade for Chris Paul, and we managed to nab a couple of extra picks, or 1 pick from that situation. So, first round of next year and 2025. Sorry, not a 2025. 2026 or something like that. Yeah, first rounder. So the fact that we managed to get something in return for Chris Paul was actually great. And obviously having Tyus Jones thrown into the mix in that Kristaps Porzingis trade, I do like our lineup now, especially considering we are in rebuild mode. But this draft pick could come back to bite us if it doesn't turn out to be good. And if Jarris Walker ends up being, or even Cam Whitmore end up being perennial all-star players, and Bilal Coulibaly ends up being a Frank Ntilikina kind of player, which, again, nothing wrong with that. Yeah. But when you're picking him at number 7, and when you've, like I said, had history of drafts going poorly year on year and not picking the right players, I kind of wanted just a secure pick in this situation. But I can understand it's that high potential where he could end up being like a top 5 or 10 player in the league, a bit like a Giannis, or he could end up being, like I said, the complete opposite. So it's one of those ones that's going to be very tough. But I'm undecided at the moment about it.
Yeah.
I'm happy that we've gone a different direction and we finally gotten rid of the players that we needed to start this rebuild up and not be in that middle ground. But at the same time, yeah, Bilal Koulibaly is still the jury's still out on whether I'm a fan of this pick or not.
Yeah, I feel like Koulibaly, it's like he's going to have to fight for every minute he plays on the floor with Tyus Jones, with Jordan Poole. Like your backcourt depth chart, definitely it's looking strong.
Mm.
Because he's not a traditional guard. Like he's shown signs that he can be a playmaker.
Mm.
But even in his under 21 stats, like he's averaging 2.5 assists per game, and there's flashes where he makes plays you're like, wow.
Mm.
But then at the same time, it's not like he's a certified ready-made point guard right away.
Yeah, facts.
And even Denny's shown signs of playmaking, so he kind of needs to find what position he'll play in the NBA, and it's got to be tough because obviously Jordan Poole's got to want to get his. If you guys keep Kyle Kuzma, that's a given. And then Tyus Jones is he's a ready-made, he's a bucket. Like he'll come in and do his thing. He can easily start in this league. Probably the best backup point guard from last season. So I hope this pick works out for you. I like the kid Koulibaly, but it'll be interesting for sure.
Yeah. I don't really, like I said, I don't hate Koulibaly as a player.
Yeah.
I think he's got, like I said, probably the most upside in this whole draft
It's just
outside
very
of Vic.
bold.
But it's just very bold, especially, like I said, with all our past failures and wrongdoings in terms of drafting talent and missing out on, all-star level talent in the process. That's where I'm skeptical. So I want this to work more than anyone because I'm a Wizards fan. But yeah, we'll just have to wait and see. And hopefully we can make some more moves that can fast-track this rebuild and get us on the right track. But in terms of the 8th pick, obviously we touched on it, Jarris Walker. Compared to Draymond Green, but I think he's a bit more advanced in terms of his skill level. I think he's probably offers more, hence why he's a top 10 pick. Draymond was a second-round pick, and he sort of developed into that player. But what do you make of Jarris Walker?
I actually had Walker. I need my flowers because in the mock draft I had him going to Indiana, so tick that off the box. But I really like this pick. I think next to Tyrese Halliburton, he'll function really well. He's not someone who needs it in his hands a lot. He plays winning basketball. He makes the right plays, makes the right reads. In a pick and roll with Tyrese, he can, pick and pop, slash. He's got the ability to be a very good two-way player in this league. He's a phenomenal rebounder. I just think he fits perfectly with the Indiana Pacers and Jarris Walker. They just coexist. It fits. They're a blue collar team. I love the pick.
It'll be interesting to see what they do with Miles Turner because that defensive presence. So if they decide to keep Miles Turner and Jarris Walker in front court, and you got Isaiah Jackson.
Yeah.
Jalen
Smith as well.
Jalen Smith, yeah. So you've definitely got some really good depth and really good defensive upside from that side of things. But yeah, I feel like this is just a typical Wizards fan. I feel like this is gonna come and bite us in the arse, and we're gonna regret passing or trading up for Koulibaly and letting a guy like Jarris Walker go. I feel like he's got that potential where he can turn into something great. But I mean, I had them as one of my winners, which we'll touch on after in terms of this draft, the Pacers. So they did a good job. That front office is doing good things and making the right calls. In terms of the number 9 pick, that was Taylor Hendricks to the Utah Jazz. I had him as high as, I think, what number did I have him? I think 6 or 5 or
5th.
Yeah, 5th.
I have him very high.
Where did I have him? I might have had him at 7 to the Pacers, possibly, or 8. Yeah, I can't remember exactly, but I think it was definitely within this range. But yeah, the fact that he did go to the Jazz, I think it's a really good pick because he's one of those. We touched on this off air. He's one of those plug and play kind of players. Whichever organization he goes to, he could probably fit because he's that prototypical forward that is very much in demand in the NBA. A guy that can play multiple positions on the defensive side or guard multiple positions on that side of the ball. He can shoot the 3 ball. He's athletic. He blocks shots. He's everything that you can ask for, and alongside a guy like Walker Kessler, Larry Markkinen, but especially from the defensive side of it, in terms of him and Walker Kessler protecting the rim, and that's going to be a very ominous defensive front court. But then, like I said, you don't have to expect him to come in and score and initiate the offense himself.
I don't think he will start. He'll be like a Jared Vanderbilt for the Jazz, like a very important piece for them. But I don't see him being that, like, especially coming into the league. Like, you can't expect him to be a 10 or 15 point per game scorer. But if he just does the little things, block shots, rebounds, he's going to be very influential for them.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, like as long as they can, I think they got Keontae George as well. So I mean that's two polar opposite kind of players. One's a scorer and a volume sort of shooter, chucker, if you want to call it that. And adding a guy like Hendricks, who's more of a defensive minded guy, but he could still be very efficient with his shooting. I think they complement one another in terms of the picks. You didn't want to get two of the same kind of player. Yeah. They're opposites, but I think it's both what the Jazz needed in terms of a guy that can put the ball in the bucket and another guy that's obviously there to be a defensive presence and really help fast track, like I said, their push to get back into playoff contention like they were when they had obviously Gobert and Donovan Mitchell. So yeah, I like the pick, and I like both those picks, especially at that point. I think you could argue they possibly could have landed Cam Whitmore instead of Keontae there. But you could say that about a lot of the teams that passed up on Cam Whitmore. Yeah. Obviously, as you can see, I've talked a lot about Cam Whitmore, but I'm a massive fan of him, and between him and Brandon Miller, I think they're my two favourite prospects in this draft outside of Wemby. So, again, we'll just have to wait and see. But I think the Jazz are doing the right thing and they're in the right direction in terms of where they're going. Yeah,
for sure. Next pick, I think you actually got this correct in the mock draft. You had Cason Wallace going to the Oklahoma City Thunder. So
yeah,
that's you called that?
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like Cason Wallace, I don't know, he got traded from the Dallas Mavericks. And at first I was like, yeah, good pick. Insurance for when Kyrie Irving leaves or something goes wrong there, because it's bound to happen realistically. Cason Wallace, a perfect guy. He feels like that rookie who could come in and feel like a veteran. Great two-way player. I mean, he's ferocious. He's like Pat Bev, but then when you add the offensive bag of someone more better than Pat Bev, you know what I mean? So I feel like he'll be very impactful for whatever team he goes for. It's just whether, I don't know, now that he's on OKC, I don't think he gets on the floor all too much.
I'll tell you what his player comparison was so you can sort of get an idea. I think
it's just like Giddey, SGA, Trey Mann. They have so much talent there.
Yeah, it's true. He's Drew Holiday, DeAnthony Melton. That's what his comparisons are. So if you can end up being a Drew Holiday kind of player,
still
yeah, definitely.
If he's Drew Holiday.
And I think again with OKC, what they like to do a lot is not, even though they sometimes will go for a fit over best available. In this case, they probably thought that, even though we got Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, we got Josh Giddey, got Trey Mann. They don't really know maybe Trey Mann's progression, how it's going to go about. He could definitely be very useful off the bench, leading that second unit, or even pairing him in different guards sets with him, Giddey, and SGA. So, and to add that in with Jalen Williams and J-Dub and J-Will.
What about J-Dub?
Yeah.
How could I forget about J-Dub?
So they're looking scary.
Yeah.
And obviously with all the picks that they've got coming up as well in the next few drafts, and
you'd expect them to make a move or like a massive play. Yeah. Originally, I would have said Zion.
Yeah.
But I do think his value has diminished. So
yeah.
I don't even know, like, who is worth the value of what they kind of have? Like, all those picks.
Dame.
But even so, like, he's come to the later part, and then even if you bring Dame, I mean, they have more, like, the assets to get more players. Yeah. It's tough, though, because they're not a destination city.
Yeah, that's
no one wants to stay in OKC, I feel like.
The only reason I suggested Dame in this situation was Portland's not the most attractive destination for free agents or to obviously be there as an NBA player. So OKC, similar kind of concept.
Maybe Dame would be willing if they promise to get more. Maybe
yeah, and if they know, because they are on that right timeline, and I think the more pieces they add, the quicker they're going to get to like that playoff run where they can scare a few teams, shock a few teams, and eventually make it to the NBA Finals. And you never know what happens. You've seen it with the teams over the last few years.
Phoenix, like teams just jump out of nowhere. So
correct. So I like the pick. and I had him, like I said, scoped there originally. And I remember a few comments saying, "Oh, OKC never drafts for best player available. They usually go for fit or whatever."
Yeah.
But pretty much, yeah, we got that one spot on. So, and we'll lead into it because we already touched on number 11, Jed Howard.
Yeah.
So we'll move on to the pick that was involved with this particular number 10 pick in terms of the trade, which was number 12, Derek Lively being drafted by OKC and then traded to the Dallas Mavericks.
Yeah.
I love this pick.
Yeah, I'll let you speak first because I know Derek Lively, but
Yeah.
I didn't really watch him all too much at Duke. So
Well, I think I watch a lot of Dallas Mavericks basketball because Luka Doncic is one of my favorite players. So I always keep tabs on him on League Pass. And I think the one area they constantly lacked, rim protection,
Yeah.
defense, after they traded Dorian Finney-Smith and obviously got rid of a few guys for Kyrie Irving, they lacked that defensive presence. They were one of the worst defensive teams in the second half of the year.
Yeah.
So you add a guy like Derek Lively, 7'2" with a 7'7" wingspan, who's actually got the skills to stretch the floor. He's got a very big offensive skill set that he probably didn't show as much because he probably wasn't required at Duke.
Yeah.
So for him to come in, he's an upgrade on Dwight Powell. He's an upgrade on JaVale McGee, an aging JaVale McGee, that is. So to have him in there playing that high pick and roll with, or pick and pop with Luka, immediately then puts less pressure on Luka Doncic to have to be like as good of a defender as everyone expects him to be. Obviously, you want him to make that jump as a defender to be.
He's never going to be like a grade.
That's what I'm saying. But like even if he gets to above average, it's still those shortcomings will be diminished a little bit by Derek Lively's presence at the rim. And I think he's one of those guys they wouldn't pick. They wouldn't trade for this particular situation if they didn't feel highly of him. So I really like this pick, and I think when you couple that with the number 22 pick, Olivier Maxine. Sorry, I forgot the name. It's a long name. Number 22 pick was where is it here? It's somewhere. Olivier Maxence Prosper. So that's his name. So he's from Marquette. So he's a defensive presence, again, very grit and grind kind of player, similar to the mold of PJ Tucker. So when you look at the Dallas Mavericks draft, they added two guys in this draft who have defensive mindsets, elite defensive players. That again is something that you needed, and that the Mavericks lost when they traded for Kyrie Irving. So I'm a big fan of both these picks, and because you don't really need guys to come in and take a lot of the scoring load, because Kyrie and Luka are going to do that. The more shots you take away from them, the more unhappy they become.
Yeah.
You just need good role players. Again, like we discussed in the earlier videos.
Not picking up in free agency, like that. I reckon, they're doing all they can, like to get these guys in. Obviously, if they're free agents, they're worth big money.
Yeah.
If you draft them and you like let them just have roles, maybe they could go far in the playoffs.
Especially with now the CBA coming in and obviously not being able to sign these guys on mid-level exceptions, and not being able to go over the luxury tax, all those implications that come into play. The draft is so much more important than it's ever been, and so that's why draft capital is essential. So if you have draft picks, you make the right picks. Again, you don't have to pay these guys a big money until their rookie contracts are done, and again, that allows you to then free up space to be able to sign specific players where need be. So I think it's the right move from the Dallas Mavericks standpoint, and I think maybe this means Kyrie stays now. I don't know. They maybe need to add another guy in free agency. I still think they're lacking that third option, like the big three is needed in the NBA nowadays, as you can see. But we'll just have to wait and see. But I think that in terms of a positive side of it, it's definitely moving.
Taking steps in the right
correct.
direction.
It's trending the right way. So,
Yeah.
what do you make of it?
Derek Lively, I know who he is, but I need to see more. Like I didn't really watch too much college basketball, but at the same time, I understand. To me, what it seems like is he's that DeAndre Jordan type of player. And that's someone Mark Cuban's obviously been, like he was fishing him. He really wanted him at the Dallas Mavericks. So this has been a kind of bit of a trend. I know Dirk's no longer there, but hey, Mark Cuban, you finally got DJ. You just drafted him, and maybe, I mean, it'll be handy for Luka in the pick and roll.
I think he's more skilled than DJ. That's the only. I
few
think
jump shots.
Yeah, correct. It's
Or he not college, but he's shown at the combine or
the
something.
Clutch Pro Day. He shot like 15 threes in a row and made all of them. So from the corner. So he's got that ability as well from the mid range to pick and pop, and I think
Yeah, I feel like you can't always show off your skill set in college, especially because college is more like role based, and then NBA gets a bit more free. So yeah, that is a very good point.
So yeah, we'll just have to see how things go for the Mavs. I'm hoping they can work it out, and hopefully Kyrie and Luka's relationship can stay steady, and they can make that charge back to the playoffs where they belong. Because it's not playoffs basketball without the Dallas Mavericks, especially with a talent like Luka Doncic. We've seen what he's done on a playoff setting. So for him to not be there this past year was a bit of a travesty. So so the last couple of picks, I'll let you round these out. So the lottery, that is.
Toronto Raptors had the next pick. They selected Grady Dick. So Grady Dick.
Best name in the draft.
Best name. Why teams are craving Dick? No. But Grady Dick. I think that just adds to, you pair him next to Scotty. Maybe OG stays. You just got these big as versatile guards. I feel like he adds. I mean, he can catch and shoot. He's one of the best shooters in the draft, or the best. He's athletic. He's obviously a gifted scorer. I feel like you can't go wrong with this pick. He's 6'7" guard like wing who scores in transition, catches and shoots. Just the overall, he's a good player, and yeah, I feel like if you really want to build around Scotty, these are the types of guys you need, and yeah, I mean, can't go wrong.
I think he's a better defender than people give him credit for. I think it's something he needs to work on again. There was some shortcomings there in college, but I think with his long wingspan and his deceptive athleticism, I think he can definitely push the personality and the I guess dynamic of that team to the right direction where they need to be. And in terms of the new coach, Serbian coach coming in, would be very big emphasis on obviously those fundamental skill-based players like Grady Dick is in terms of great shooting, great fundamentals. So it's probably the right pick for him. It would have makes sense why they wouldn't have gone in another direction, especially considering at one point Grady Dick was looking at being a top 10 pick in some mock drafts. So
had him going to Dallas. So
yeah, so to get him at 13, it is a bit of a steal. So I like the pick. Not really much to say about it. Pick 14, that was the Pelicans, and Jordan Hawkins, yeah. So again, arguably made the case to be one of the best shooters in this draft as well, according to Jonathan Gavoni, and just from what we've seen in the tournament. Yeah. He had an amazing showing, obviously pushed his draft stock up. I think in his individual workouts, he really showed off what he could do from that shooting standpoint and, coming off screens and very NBA-like action. So I think he immediately helps that Pelicans team, especially with the uncertainty of Zion. You need guys that can score the ball. And
you can just fit in.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. Shooters can just fit in at any sort of situation. Doesn't really matter. Like certain players who are athletic or hyper athletic and don't have ball dominant, etc., might need to be in certain situations. But a guy like Jordan Hawkins, who doesn't really need the ball, can play off the ball. It's important in this NBA today, where a lot of guys are ball dominant, to be able to have that ability to kick it out and shoot the ball. And I like the pick there.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like, I don't know, Pelicans did the right thing. Like, if you're picking late in the lottery, there's a guy like Jordan Hawkins on the board. It's just like, you have to take him. They could have gone high risk, high reward, and gone with a guy like Hutzkefino and took him earlier, but yeah, not even. But I feel like they really did want Scoot Henderson. Obviously, there were rumors they wanted to trade up. They didn't make that work. Kayson Wallace wasn't on the board, the point guard that they probably were after. Yeah. So it's like, yeah, you did the right thing. You took the best available probably, and he'll probably fit next to Dyson Daniels, Trey Murphy, B.I. Zion, see what happens there, and Pelicans just go again, try push for the playoffs. Yeah.
So that's the lottery wrapped up. So we'll go through the remaining picks, and we'll just let the viewers know, obviously, where each player went, and then sort of just give our take on who the winners and losers of this draft were.